There is a nightmare brewing for Games Workshop on Warhammer right now. 10th edition Warhammer 40k has finally officially launched and things have gone really badly. A new era of Warhammer has arrived, but being helmed by the same old Games Workshop. In theory, everything I wanted has come true. Every faction updated at once? Check. Every faction slimmed down to iconic abilities? Check. Less stratagems, less meaningless choices, less bloat? Check and check and check. And yet, like someone who has tasked a genie with a wish and had it twisted on them in a terribly ironic fashion, this has all gone terribly wrong. I have watched so many episodes of The Twilight Zone, I should have seen this coming. Now, first, let's talk about the good stuff. I have been playing a lot of Warhammer 40k this month, specifically 10th edition, specifically as the Genestealer Cultist faction. Yes, I collected Genestealer cults and drew carry. I do everything I can to avoid mirror matches. But the fact that I've been playing as the Genestealer Cultists is really important, because with the switch from 9th edition Warhammer 40k to 10th edition 40k, all the factions have been totally reworked by Games Workshop. Everyone has gotten a big special army ability, and playstyles have changed, and players have had to adapt. And you might imagine that this has led to some issues, and you would be correct. Some factions, like the Genestealers, have received a generous bounty from Games Workshop, rolling into 10th edition with an incredibly fun, flavor-filled, and strategic army ability. In the case of Genestealers, we get to endlessly respawn our forces, and it's really awesome. I've never felt more like a popular revolution rising up against the oppressors, and I've had a lot of joy taking my Brotherhood of the Ballot out for a spin, playing against Eldar, Space Marines, and, well, okay, mostly just those two factions. More on that later. Other factions, however, not so lucky. Death Guard are pretty notorious right now for being in a bit of a state. Not very good, not very effective, losing a lot of matches, not fun to play, and the faction feels like it's lost its identity. Ooh. And that last bit is the main crux of the issue. Win rate, lose rate, these things can be amended with points updates and rules errata. Faction feeling like it lost its identity, however, that's a major issue that impacts not just competitive players, but everybody. The Death Guard army ability right now just does not reflect the fantasy and theme that the player base expect when playing that faction. It's designed around making enemy units weaker rather than making their own units tougher, which was the hallmark of the Death Guard. And this is particularly problematic because it means that it cannot simply be resolved by making some units in the Death Guard roster cheaper. And we haven't even talked about how some armies in 10th have absolutely busted powerful army abilities like Space Marines and Eldar. Yeah, that's why I've been playing so many of them. And then there's other armies that have abilities that functionally do nothing, like the Tyranid Shadow and the Warp ability. Oh damn it, we've accidentally left Happy Go Lane and instead taken a detour down Critique Alley. Okay, let's get back to extolling the virtues of the new edition, lest I receive more death threats in the comments section. Okay, where was I? So, there has been a lot of improvement in Warhammer 40k with the move to the new edition. A lot of the problems with 9th edition have been dropped. I'm a casual player, not competitive, and I feel like this edition was an attempt to win back the casual players who tried Warhammer out during the pandemic and then dropped it like it was a soapy beehive. There is a lot less stuff to worry about now. A lot less complicated buffs that players need to keep track of. There's a lot less of, though not total removal of, a bunch of gotchas, moments in a game where something unexpected happens, completely ruining your plans. There's a lot less armor penetration on every single weapon in the game, meaning that armor actually matters now, and tanks feel less like cardboard boxes on wheels, or anti-grav jets in the case of Eldar. And this means that they feel tough and fun and different from infantry, which was a bit of an issue in the previous editions of Warhammer. Oh, and of course, best of all, welcome to Stratholme, because thousands of stratagems have been culled in a massive purge. Hallelujah! This is genuinely welcome, sorely needed, and now every single faction has been slimmed down down from the 674 stratagem abilities available to use at any one stage previously, down to a measly 6. That's right, count them, 6 stratagems. Perfecto! Combine this with the slower gain of command points that are spent to use those stratagem abilities, this means that there are actually meaningful choices now, as opposed to 9th edition, where you'd open up your spreadsheet of different stratagems and enter the human equivalent of a blue screen during a battle, trying to decide what to do. Restraint is the keyword of 10th edition, except when it comes to the Space Marine Index. For reference, this is Space Marines, this is Dark Eldar. Notice a difference? Yeah. And likewise, Warhammer 40k is a lot more complicated than other war games, it must be said. But still, 10th edition is an improvement on 9th. And I will say, 10th edition has generated for me some of the funnest games of Warhammer 40k that I have ever played. Or at least, much better than any 9th edition game, because all of the guff has been stripped away. The new edition is undoubtedly a step in the right direction, and overall adding index cards, free datasheets, and rolling back the bloat was all great and has been a huge success. I, for one, feel vindicated. But, and you knew this was coming, I sorta had to finagle my way to get to the fun games of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. See, 10th edition has some really big problems, issues that may have fundamentally strangled this new edition before it even crawled out of the crib, and the community are having to deal with those problems. But before I mention those, can I just call out something that has not gotten the attention it deserves? So, Games Workshop pretty much lied, right? Games Workshop originally claimed that 10th edition would be free, and while they did technically achieve that by releasing the core rules as a free download on Warhammer Community, if you want to play the actual game of 10th edition in any meaningful way, you'll have to pick up an essentially mandatory deck of tarot-sized cards containing different deployment, missions, and side missions to use in the game, priced at £19 or $34. These are not a luxury. They are a necessity to have fun and to enjoy the game, and they ain't free. These aren't online. To get them, you'll need to buy or engage in illicit downloads. So yeah, basically the game is free if you look at it like a dwarf lawyer embedded in corporate contract law rolling through the Apple terms of service. Also, while I'm here, the models in the Leviathan launch box are exclusive to that box only. There's no word on when they'll be released separately, though we have to assume they will at some stage at some price. That's all the details we have. Thanks, open and communicative Games Workshop. Really turned a leaf, haven't you? This is basically standard operating procedure for Games Workshop at this stage, and it remains a pretty predatory way of releasing models, and yet it has gone totally untalked about in the wider community because we've all just decided to drink the Kool-Aid. If I want to buy the new Terminators, I should not have to pick up hundreds of points worth of Tyranids, a completely different faction, to get them. Anyway, sorry, just wanted to get that off my chest. As always, Games Workshop, I know you watch the content. Feel free to send me review copies of your products so I can let you know ahead of time that these are bad ideas. But back to the main point of this video, we talked about problems with different faction abilities earlier, but there's a lot more fundamental issues at play here. For one, the process of actually building an army list in 10th edition is really not very good at all. The Longbeards have been a-grumbling about 10th edition army building, and for good reason. It needs to be fundamentally changed. I mean, going straight back to the drawing board, back to square one. Right now, there's basically zero choices to make when it comes to army building, specifically around war gear for your units. I mean, I assume that this was done to make the list building easier for casual players, which is a worthy goal, but frankly, what they have ended up with is just downright bizarre and hostile to casual play. All war gear is free to add to units.
AK-47s for everyone!
Meaning that you can't really tweak army lists anymore, making list building a lot simpler, yes, but also a lot more inflexible, and in my opinion, harder to parse, and it takes a lot longer now. There are just better loadouts for units now. Army lists are filled with trap options because players, no matter what they choose to equip their units with, still have to pay the points for the best possible options. And this means that players are punished for not taking the optimal choice every single time. This means that if you're a competitive player, you just have less options. And if you're a narrative player who likes to take certain weapons because they suit the theme of your army, then you get punished for that too. You basically have to load up every single unit with every single option that is available to them because there is no points cost or downside for doing so. Pour one out for the all Lehman Russ tank all the time Imperial Guard player who also hated all the optional sponson weapons in 9th edition and chose not to glue them on at that time. Big mistake. And this impacts how players engage with the game too. For example, Dark Elder Cabalite warriors have to take every single weapon option that is available to them. Each one, only once, resulting in 5 different guys with 5 different weapons, each one of them with a different preferred type of target. One that's good against infantry, one that's good against tanks, one that's good against, I don't know, Eldar on a blue moon. Meaning that when it comes time to shoot with your Cabalite warriors, gameplay slows down to a halt while you laboriously target 5 different types of enemy units with the optimal weapon, rolling every single shot individually, absolutely killing not only your opponent, but also the pacing of an already very slow war game. I really cannot stress enough just how badly designed this is. Everyone gets charged for optional war gear, even if they don't want it. I guess someone from the GW marketing department has graduated into the rules writing team, because now if you want to take anything at all, you have to take everything. Hello there, bundle box. But only for war gear. It's a nightmare. And then, if broken army abilities in the worst list building in Warhammer history weren't enough, we also have a whole host of what can only be described as fundamental issues with the core rules of 10th edition, the actual meat of the game, and that's really scary. It's like bad coding in a video game. This is the biggest wargame company in the world, and they're releasing products that feel half-baked, like we're paying for an alpha test of a game. It's very clear that 10th edition was rushed out prematurely to ensure that it came out this year so that the next annual report from GW can talk about how they made more money than Midas. The result, though, has been, I don't even know where to start. There are almost too many problems to mention here. Line of sight, how one determines who and what a miniature can see, is finicky, awkward, and indeterminate, especially when it comes to vehicles and terrain. There's an entire keyword called towering that has caused so many problems that every single tournament organizer is right now having to put sticky tape on all of their terrain, covering up every single window. Mortal wounds are a huge issue, especially when combined with the devastating wounds ability. A rules combination that already cropped up in 9th edition was fixed and now is an issue again. The flagship new morale system, Battle Shock, has been oddly irrelevant in most of my games, rendering most Battle Shock based abilities and armies that are based on them mostly write-offs. The Battle Shock system itself feels like it's not even finished yet. Melee in the game seems to have been consigned to the trash for some reason, as it is weaker across the board, and I can't see why. In contrast, indirect fire, like artillery, is once again annoying, unengaging, and unfun to play around, yet is incredibly powerful and oppressive. And shooting has been buffed as well for some godforsaken reason, because it was already incredibly powerful. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of issues. There's just far too many to even go into here in a single video. And I think what's worst about all of this is that these issues were problems in previous iterations of the game, and they had been fixed before. It's almost as if there is no institutional memory at Games Workshop. There are no lessons being learned, except that army boxes apparently are the only way to sell an army these days. It's clear to me that the Games Workshop business model is impacting the game severely and to the game's detriment. And finally, it feels insane to me that when we moved into this new edition, it has rendered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of books completely obsolete, and it didn't even warrant a mention from anyone. Isn't it insane how we're in a situation where that can happen and no one talks about it because it's just the expected course of action? The fact that you can even play boarding patrols in this new 10th edition Warhammer is actually exceptional. So yeah, remember that when we see the very next season of Warhammer 40k, because it's going to happen going from 10th edition to 11th edition too. Overall, 10th edition Warhammer right now feels like a public playtest. There's already been an errata rendering a bunch of the physical index cards out of date already before they even release those index cards. There's still tons of confusing rules that don't make any sense. Index cards themselves are pretty expensive, and they feel almost more like a temporary stopgap until codices arrive. This new edition feels like an open beta. It needs more work, and while patches are welcome, they shouldn't be a crutch for a game to release in an unfinished state just because the executives want to hit a certain number on a spreadsheet. So can Games Workshop recover from this? Maybe. However, I suspect that any solution that they are going to have is going to be monetized aggressively, completely undoing a lot of the huge upsides to this new edition of 40k. One of the biggest deals, one of the best parts of this was being able to get access to all of Warhammer for free. But when you go on to the 40k app, it tells you exactly what they think of that idea. You have full access to the Battleforge army building tool for a limited time only. So if you're frustrated about 40k and maybe you're a little bit curious about some other ways to play with miniatures, then check out this video here. And if you want to support this channel, then please check out Patreon for some awesome bonus videos, Patreon live streams, and even secret Discord channels where you can hang out with me in a very welcoming community. And a huge thanks to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread, Crypto Kev, Mistress Arby, Novini, and Travis Hunter. Thank you so much, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye!